Hello everybody, welcome to the fourth episode of Let's Talk About, and today I have Rory standing in for Alex because Alex, is in Paris for the global launch of the Huawei
Honor View 20.
of the Honor View 20. I've been told he's having lots of fun there.
You want a piece of me?
So hopefully he'll come back soon and we can continue on doing some more work here at StoryChange.com. Alright, first of all, thank you very much for joining us again in another installment of Let's Talk About. Obviously, if you've been following the series, you know that in Let's Talk About, we talk about a lot of interesting topics in really more detail and depth, so that you get informed of the interesting things that's going on in the world of technology. We're going to talk about the Xiaomi folding phone. So I think a couple of days ago, founder of Xiaomi was shown in a video playing with a dual folding smartphone. A lot of people on the internet are going crazy about it, saying that, hey, it's a real phone and it's going to happen. I wrote an article and said that I'm quite skeptical about whether that phone is legit or not, and we're going to go into detail about that. And then we're going to talk about the best Android One smartphones you can get in Malaysia. So we're going to cover what is Android One and what are the phones available with Android One in Malaysia, and what is the best Android One that you can get in Malaysia. So that is a little later in this episode. And finally, as we mentioned, Alex is in Paris to cover the launch of the Honor View 20. If you don't know by now, the Honor View 20 has a twin. It's called Huawei Nova 4. And I'm confused because Honor and Huawei, Honor is actually a part of Huawei, and the Nova 4 and the Huawei View 20 are virtually identical. There are some slight differences, but we're going to talk about which one is the best and which one should you get. If you're interested to know about the Huawei, what was it again?
Nova 4 and Honor View
Huawei
20.
Nova 4 and the Honor View 20. Okay,
Yes.
so that's a little later in this episode. Right now, let's talk about the Xiaomi folding phone. So a couple of days ago, we saw this video on Twitter. It showed the founder of Xiaomi, Mr. Bin Lin, you can call him Mr. Bin, playing with a phone that looks like it's dual folding, right? So you can fold it on one side and like that, right? So it's a lot of people are calling it's the first dual folding smartphone in the world, and it's all from that video. So that video is 30 seconds. I think we're gonna let you watch the video after this, and then we're gonna talk about the device. Okay, so Rory, you've seen the video, right? And then this thing about dual folding. So we had a discussion, and then you asked me, what does it mean by dual folding?
Exactly. So right now, my first, the thing that triggered me was the word dual folding. Is it really dual folding? Isn't it just a folding phone where you fold the phone? If the phone folds, then it's a folding phone. Why do you need to call it a dual folding phone? You don't say you fold your clothes or your clothes are folded. You don't say you quadruple fold your clothes, right? It's not quadruple folding t-shirt.
Yeah, I guess that's true lah. I mean, I guess maybe people just want to have that distinction. Okay, you have like a foldable phone and a dual folding phone, which automatically makes it 2 times better than a folding phone.
Yeah, and it's a very smartphone manufacturer kind of thing, right? Where they want to get every edge they can over the competition. So it's like, oh, you have a single folding phone, we have a dual folding phone.
Yeah, I guess. But the biggest question, I think we talked about this in a few of our other episodes in Let's Talk About, is like, do you really even need a folding phone? I've never really felt the need to have a folding phone. I'm really happy with the form factor of the devices that I have with me right now. What do you think?
Honestly, I think it depends on the application. So for me, I think the ideal form factor for a dual folding phone, or just a normal folding phone,
you fell into that, right?
Buying into the marketing
yeah.
already, is to have a normal device that's easy to handle with one hand, and it's easy to scroll. You can reach all the corners. But then when you want to watch content, let's say 18 by 9 or 16 by 9 or 21 by 9, it can fold out into like a really long screen or really wide screen, so you get that fully immersive view without all the obtrusive black bars and stuff.
Alright, so before we go into the Xiaomi folding phone, right, I want to talk about like the history of folding phones. I think November last year, Samsung showcased a prototype of a folding device that when it opened up had like a square form factor, and then when you folded it had like a more of a, like a traditional normal 16 by 9 or 18 by whatever this is. So that phone mostly showcased the technology that flexible displays are now possible, and they are looking into developing a phone that you can actually fold. And then moving towards the end of the year, we saw another company called Royal, a Chinese company that's actually developing flexible displays more than devices. So they are the core of their business is actually flexible displays rather than phones. But to prove that their flexible display work, they developed a phone called the FlexPi, and that one had like a curry puff folding so it folded like that. The problem with that phone was that it had like a huge gap between the folds, so you cannot fold it like really tight. It's not like a really nice fold. And then the other issue was the OS, so the operating system, because our Android device has an operating system that works with a normal conventional looking phone like this. You can imagine the complexity when you start programming devices that open up and can change forms in so many different ways. So I don't think that flexible phones are coming near in at least this year. I don't think that those devices are going to be available for sale here. Then the game changer came when this video came out, and it looked like really real. And so everybody was like, oh, this is it, this is real. Xiaomi has a folding phone. I have an issue because number one, Xiaomi has never showcased their capabilities of having a folding phone. So who is going to supply the folding display? So FlexPi, so they did, Royal, they did the FlexPi. It's not as polished as the Xiaomi one. And there's Samsung. I doubt that they're going to get the supply from Samsung. I could be wrong.
I don't see why not. It could very well come from Samsung. And then there's a third player, LG. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, at the beginning of last year, they said, I saw a report from one of those Wall Street Journal reports. If I'm not mistaken, it's Wall Street Journal. But where they had an insider say that with regards to the folding smartphone with flexible OLED display, LG was actually ahead of Samsung. But correct me if I'm wrong. So they had already two big display players in the market for you to choose from, which is Samsung and LG. So I don't think it's an issue of supply. And if you're talking about history, yeah, Xiaomi has never showed off the a flexible concept, or they never had an inkling of them that they were in development for a flexible display smartphone, right? But there was no rumors when they came up with the Mi Mix as well. There was no hint or rumor that it was going to be like this really slim bezel smartphone. And then when it eventually launched, it was like. So
yeah.
I guess the thing here is Xiaomi seems pretty good at keeping secrets.
Yeah, well, okay. So if we go back to you mentioning LG and stuff like that. So at CES this year, we saw LG showing off their rollable display. So I guess in that respect, they are probably advanced. I don't know how far, whether it's 3 months or 6 months down the line in terms of technology gap, right, between Samsung and LG. But I mean, display is just one component. It makes the technology possible. But in terms of the iterativeness, right, to be able to put that display onto a phone, to have an OS that can operate with that display, and to have a phone that has the battery life, the durability, and everything else. And I'm sure like the manufacturers are like really smart. They are thinking about all these things. But I still don't feel what I see. So come back to the video. I still don't think that what I see the founder of Xiaomi playing is the real deal. So you've seen the video. What do you think of the device?
I mean, yeah, I see your concerns, because there are a couple of moments in there where it feels like, wait a minute, this looks almost, or as you said it, CGI'd.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that it's not I don't believe that it's CGI, but I think there was some camera tricks involved to get something as something like that to work out or look as smooth as it is. I don't think it was done in one single take. I'm pretty sure they had like a few tries at least, especially the software that seemed particularly buggy. And you're right, regarding software and regarding where do you put all the other hardware components, right? Like the battery, like the processors and stuff, which all live in what was a pretty big form factor. And then now it needs to fold, and then you get a much smaller base plate for you to fold around, right? So it looks like a lot of a challenge. But regarding software, I think Samsung has done a lot of groundwork with Google, because when they revealed their folding smartphone, the report was that they were working closely with Google to develop a version of Android that was compatible with this folding display form factor. And Xiaomi themselves, they're a very well-established software company, so I'm sure they can figure it out. But coming back to whether or not we'll see like a proper ready-made, you can buy off the shelf folding smartphone, like a consumer grade one, maybe not. I'm still a little bit hesitant on that. I agree that from what we've seen so far, it doesn't look like they have something that's ready to go into the market just yet. But you never know. They may just be showing off what was the smartphone. It's hard to fathom this kind of. It's hard to wrap your head around their development cycles.
For me, like usually when stories like this come out, right, when manufacturers showcase videos like this, right, the first thing that I ask, right, what is the reason? What is the intent? What is the objective? Why do you do that? So most of the time, right, so companies use media like as a tool. It's either a tool to bring attention to themselves, or it's a tool to divert attention from themselves, or there is a reason. And I feel that this concept phone, right, is not real for a few things. So if you look at the video, we'll probably play it back for you guys later. Number one is it's a 30-second video, 30 or 10 second, I can't remember. Right? So if you go to the 4th second, when he starts rotating the phone, so he was holding the phone like this, unfolded, and then he starts rotating it this way. And I cannot put my finger on it, but it just doesn't look right. It just doesn't look real. Maybe it's because we've never seen a folding phone before. It's something new in my mind, and it doesn't look right absolutely at all because it's a new format. Or maybe it's just not real at all, right? Because what is it? Okay, that's one. And then number two is after that, he starts folding the phone. So if I can demonstrate, I'm just going to use this phone, right? He folds it like this. And it was an angle, like if you look at that camera, the angle was like this. So when he folded this way, I don't know whether you can see. Can you see the seam between the two phones? Can you see that? In the video, you can see the light cutting through that seam. So we were talking about it, and a lot of you guys, the people behind the camera, and you also thought that, hey, that could be like a glossy laminate that's reflecting off whatever. But I don't know. Why don't you guys take a look at the video and you tell me whether that seam, like that you look at it. I think it's in the 5-second point of that video. You just look at it where it folded, right? You can see the light. And if you look at it carefully, you can actually see the sofa behind you can see what's going on in the background. So take a look at the 4-second mark. I think we're going to play that video for you after this. And then you let us know in the comments with whether this concept is real or not. And then there's another proof. And then after he folded the phone, he rotates it again to the lens portrait format, and the software rotated twice. We talked about it. Rory chalked it up to like a buggy software, and you said that Xiaomi has been developing software. I mean, it's good, but I don't think they're the best lah. So I'm not convinced. And then there are other things that they need to solve aside from the battery. Where do you put the ports, and where do you put the cameras? So the Xiaomi example, right, it folded like that, like it completely folded like twice, and I don't see any cameras anywhere. can you live with a smartphone that doesn't have a camera? Because most of the pictures that's been uploaded on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, are from smartphones. Almost 90%, I can bet. So do you want to have a smartphone that, I think not having a phone that has a camera, right, will make it like 80% useless. I think lah.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, anything you want to add to that, or with the points that I have?
Yeah, that video does raise a lot of suspicions because number one, it's like you said, it looks like you can see right through the seam, right? So, but that could be any number of reasons. It could be light reflection. It could maybe even be the display itself leaking a bit of light through because the product's body isn't fully covered up. So it could be that because it's an OLED panel. And then regarding the software, yeah, I'm sure there are a whole ton of bugs to work out for something to work with this kind of folding form factor. So it can be because of any number of reasons. I feel I'm not ready to chalk this up to like this is CGI just yet. I think it's at least it will work in a fixed number of practical situations. But regarding the what was the other thing you were talking about again?
Okay, so the folding mechanism.
Oh, where to put the cameras?
And where to put the cameras? Yes.
Yeah. I think that. For me, that doesn't seem like that big of an issue just yet because you can the way I see it, you can tuck it in the middle panel, right, and then have the screen fold over it, so that if you're using it in a small form factor, you don't see the cameras, but then you can open it up and maybe take a photo like that. It may be kind of awkward because it's like taking a photo of a tablet, right? Yeah. So. That's something that they can work on. I think regarding selfies, we have seen punch hole displays already, so maybe they could implement something like that.
But I don't see it in the video. So
yeah. But that could just be because this is like a technology showcase, right? Where you don't actually see a finished product yet. So it doesn't have all the components. It just has what it needs to make the public go, whoa.
Yeah, so I mean, to add to that point, I will chalk it up to it being vaporware. It's a video, very short, maybe 10 seconds again. I don't remember how long it was. And it's just, I guess if we tried really hard, we could probably make a video like that and say, hey, we have a prototype version of a folding phone. We could probably do that.
Yeah.
So I think I think you're 50-50 or you're...
I'm 50-50.
You're 50-50. I'm 100% I don't think it's real. Let us know what you think in the comment section, whether it's real or not, whether you're with Rory 50-50 or whether with me 100, or whether you are 100 that side saying that, hey, Xiaomi has the capability, the technology is there, and the folding phone is legit. Let me know and tell me why you think it's real. Have some points, okay? So let me know in the comments below. Now that's over and done with. Let's now go into our next topic in the show, which is the best Android One smartphone you can get in Malaysia. What is the best Android One smartphone available in Malaysia right now? But before we go into what devices are available in Malaysia and which one you should get, I'm a bit like confused of what actually is Android One. So what's Android One?
Okay, so Android One started out as like this program from Google. It's not a software program, but like an initiative, right? So it's this program from Google where it's designed to help affordable smartphones, really entry-level smartphones that really don't have much going for them in terms of hardware. So you're looking at like really entry-level processors, you're looking at 1 gig of RAM, 8 gigs of storage, stuff like that. So it's a really optimized version of Android, like a clean stock experience that can run even on the most rudimentary hardware. So the most basic, like bare bones kind of hardware, it can run this Android One. So that's what this program is all about.
So it started out as that. So
yes.
The notion was to run a software that can run on basic hardware. And then?
Exactly. So that was to help development in the emerging markets, right? Like India or Indonesia, for example. And then it evolved. So once like these countries started developing, and then you can see the evolution in Android One. And it actually started with the Xiaomi Mi A1, which is actually a very interesting thing that I think I'll get into a bit later. So then it evolved into not just being for these basic entry-level smartphones. It became just something simple as getting really clean stock version of Android with no added bloatware straight out of Google. into your smartphone. So you're guaranteed 2 years of software support. That means if your phone launches with Android 9, for example, it should get 10 and 11 as well. So it's a really stock version of Android that manufacturers don't really need to tinker around with, and you can get it. It gives you almost a similar experience to the Google Pixel's software. So it's this really clean, really stock Android that works with all sorts of phones. So you see it on mid-range devices most commonly, but you also see it on flagships like with Nokia, for example. And then that entry-level side, where it was designed for really basic smartphones, that became Android Go, which sort of launched with Android Oreo. So there was Android Oreo Go Edition. So that was all about memory optimization, about data optimization, because 4G quota can be very expensive in emerging markets. So it's about controlling these two things so that your phone will run as optimally as possible. One example is the Nokia One, which actually launched here in Malaysia. So that was like this colorful device with cases that you can actually swap, and then that became
Plastic body.
Yeah, plastic body, and really like a basic screen. So it's a basic smartphone experience, but you still get full Google. So there were even like light apps, Go optimized apps is what they call it. So that became the light version. And then Android One was allowed to evolve into this basically stock Android promise, and that's it.
Okay, so the way I see it from what you explained, right, there's 3 layers. So you have the Android Go, which is like for cheap devices, developed for the proliferation of smartphones in developing markets like India, Indonesia, maybe slightly in Malaysia, Vietnam and things like that. And then you have Android One, which is the promise of stock Android on other devices other than Google, right?
Yes.
So because Pixel is stock Android, but it's not considered Android One.
Not to my knowledge, no, because that's a Google thing. Yeah.
So is it like a different version of a software, or is it just like a branding?
I'm not too sure about that because I'm not sure what happens in sort of like the back end side of things, but with regards to how you use it, the UI, for example, it's actually very similar between Android One devices and the Google Pixel devices. So it's really, really similar. You're getting pretty much the identical experience across these two devices.
Yeah, but for me, right, so we talk about this promise of stock Android. So I've tried a number of phones with stock Android. I don't know, I don't get it. I mean, stock Android really means stock. You don't get a lot of software, and you have to download a lot of software. For example, you don't even have like Facebook, you don't have Instagram and Twitter. You don't have basic tools like, I don't know whether there's a calculator. There is a calculator.
There's no calculator.
Yeah, so there's nothing, right? It's basically like an OS. And for me, it's a bit cumbersome to download all those things. The good part is, okay, I get the promise of getting updates really quickly. That means it's secure because I get more security updates quickly, and I'm promised 2 years of security. Of software updates. But I don't really, I guess I don't really appreciate the promise of a stock Android because of the because of the hassle of needing to download things. What are the other benefits? I mean, why do you need stock Android?
So I think there are two ways to look at this. The stock Android, you see it as this really bare bones system.
Basic.
With not a whole bunch of features that you might normally find.
I mean,
on
the
like
features are there, but it's the software.
Correct.
The tools.
So the tools. So not having the tools is one way to look at it, but another way to look at it is you have this sort of clean slate that you can decide what goes in. You don't have to worry about removing or uninstalling apps that you don't need. For example, let's compare it to Huawei's EMUI, right? That comes with a whole bunch of Huawei apps. So you have multiples, you have duplicate apps. For example, you have Google Photos and you also have the Gallery app, which is not something people want. So it takes up space. And then there are also third-party apps. For example, there's Booking.com. And then if you look at in the Indonesian market, there are also specific apps that are designed that have to be preloaded in like a non-stock Android device. So those they could encounter problems when it comes to software updates down the line, because you have to make sure everything works properly before your phone starts running. So that, from my understanding, will slow down software update times, and it will even create sometimes software bugs, which I have experienced before with these
I remember
premium
you
apps.
tried with the Zenfone Max, right?
Yes.
So there was a software that literally crashed the phone.
It killed the phone completely.
But it was a prototype, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it was
the software was a
yeah,
pre-release.
yes, exactly. So it was an early I think they call it a engineering sample when we first got it. Yeah, it wasn't a retail unit.
It's good that you mentioned that because I don't realize that Gallery is a software that you need to download, right? So if I use my Note, for example, right, the Gallery software is there. So with Android One, I have to download.
Not
Gallery.
necessarily. It comes with photos.
It comes with Google Photos.
Yes.
Yeah, so you don't have that duplicate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I guess that would be something that's beneficial.
But it's definitely not for everyone because I know a lot of people who prefer these Android skins with all these features. So they have, like, for example, even actually if you look at something like a Xiaomi Android One device, they actually come preloaded with a couple of apps that are designed to, a couple of tools to help you along the way. So they have the calculator, for example. Some even come with their own version of their own camera app because in the beginning, Google didn't have a camera app that could support dual cameras. So Xiaomi had to put their own one in. So that's not like completely stock version because the completely stock one that comes with Android One doesn't have all these features.
Yeah, that's kind of cheating, right? It's kind of like defeating the purpose of like the promise of a stock Android. So now I'm like slightly even more confused because so you have Android One, which you say is like the stock version.
Yes.
But manufacturers are allowed to put in.
They can if they want, but I'm not entirely sure what the rules are here from the manufacturer standpoint. Yeah, so I guess you have you can sort of change things up if you want because there have been a couple of apps, but they're very minimal. They're not apps that you won't use, for example. So they're more like tools than actual applications.
So it's not like third-party apps.
Yeah, it's not like booking.
It's not going to be like a travel app.
Yeah, exactly.
So as a brand, right? So as a flavor, there's Android Go, which is for cheap devices for entry-level devices, and then there's the Android, which is like it can be customized by manufacturers like Samsung or Xiaomi or Huawei, and then in the middle is this Android One, which tries or tries to deliver the purest experience of Android, other than Google devices.
Yes.
So outside of Pixel, which is like the purest form of Android, you have Android One.
Exactly.
And then but we see Android One devices, so we see Android One devices as like mostly fairly cheap. I don't recall having like a flagship spec Android One.
There are actually flagship spec Android ones, but not many.
Alright, so before you go into that, like the levels of Android ones, right? So we're talking about the best Android One smartphone you can get in Malaysia. We just finished covering about what Android One is. Then I want to know like, what Android One devices are available currently in the country.
In Malaysia, the choices are actually not that high. So we don't have like all the Android ones. Most notably, we don't have most of Motorola's devices, which are also, if I'm not mistaken, all Android One phones. And they have some models with both Android One and their own Moto skin, but we don't get a lot of their Android One devices. So in Malaysia, that did change regarding Motorola, where we have the latest version of the Motorola phone to come into Malaysia, which is this one, which is the Motorola One. That's all. That's what it's called.
So the device is called Motorola One.
It's called the Motorola One. So it's an Android One device from Motorola. So this is a mid-range smartphone, like you said. I agree, most of the devices that you will see running Android One tend to be mid-ranger devices. But there are a couple of flagships that we will touch on a bit later. Okay. But this is the latest Android One phone to come into Malaysia from Motorola. And I think it's been a while. This is like the first Motorola to come into Malaysia in like quite a long time. So the last one was, I believe, the Z series, which is their flagship device. So this phone, honestly, I'm not super impressed with it because the specs are like, it has a Snapdragon 625 processor. It only has a 3000 mAh battery. But worst of all, it has a 720p screen.
Wow.
Which
that's the same as the iPhone XR.
Well, I mean, if you put it that way.
But I don't like the biggest problem with the iPhone XR is the 720p display.
Yes, exactly.
And
so this has a 720p display, and the problem with this is that it's actually quite expensive. You're paying a premium for this smartphone. It's 799 ringgit. So for that kind of money, you can actually get something like this, which is the Mi A2. Which is the successor to the Mi A1, which was like the first phone that kickstarted this whole all new Android One program. So this was a much hyped phone. A lot of people are looking forward to it, and it's one of those devices where it's like, wow, you know. So let me give you a bit of history about the Mi A1 series, which I was really excited about. So Xiaomi as a company are this smartphone makers that pair a lot of good hardware with a very low price.
Yeah.
So that was like the biggest selling point. That's why people that's why their Mi fans, as they call them, are really, really loyal, because they love them because of the amount of phone that you can get for the money that you pay.
And then they took it like a level higher with Poco.
Yes. So with Poco, which which subscribed to that same philosophy, you know. So they made the certain trade-offs. There are definitely trade-offs, of course, but the result is you can get a really good phone for whatever price point that you pay. So then the problem I had with Xiaomi was that all their devices ran on MIUI, and I'm not the biggest fan of MIUI. That sort of changed a bit with MIUI 10, but in general, before that, from 9 down, I wasn't a big fan of it because it looked really cartoony. I didn't have the option to add more icons onto my home screen. There were only 4. There is no app drawer, for example. Those are
You can only add 4 icons
in a row.
Okay.
Yeah, in a row, so you can only have 4. So even if you had a really high resolution screen, a really big screen, you would just have 4 really far icons that are really far apart. So it's very similar to iOS in that sense. So that was my biggest problem with it. And then in the past, if you wanted like a close to stock or near stock Android experience, you had to pay more because you couldn't get a Xiaomi device because they were king at that time. But then came the Mi A1, which was like this value for money. It had excellent specs for the time that it launched. It had Xiaomi's low prices, but it also came with Android One, which is this really stock version of Android, and it was like everyone was like, what? You know, it's like the stars aligned for people who are stock Android fans. You could get awesome hardware from Xiaomi and great software from Google. So that was perfect. And then came this, which was the Mi A2, which is a successor device to that. So this was honestly received with a bit of a lukewarm reception because for me, the biggest problem with this was the battery. So it's only a 3,000 milliamp hour cell. But it has great internals besides the battery. So you have a Snapdragon 660 processor, which is an upper mid-range processor. Normally you have to pay more than 1,000 ringgit easily for that kind of processing power at the time. And it has 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage. But this can be yours for the same price as this, which is a Snapdragon 625. Much older, much less powerful.
So it has a better processor, better display, right?
Better display also. This is full HD.
And I would argue that maybe the camera is better as well.
Yes, I would think so. But I haven't tested the Motorola One's camera yet. Though this camera is really, really impressive.
Yeah, for the price, right? I remember that the Mi A1 and the Mi A2 had cameras that were, well, if they're not on par, but they could give a lot of the flagships a run for the money.
In good lighting, definitely. In fact, this has a dual camera setup, right? So one of it is a 12 megapixel sensor, and the other one's a 20 megapixel sensor. So the 20 megapixel sensor is, so that means this dual camera setup is slightly different from the Mi A1, which had two of the same sensors but at different focal lengths. So these are same focal length but different sensors. So the 20 megapixel one, it's there to improve low light performance because the old one wasn't very good at low light. This is slightly better.
So with 20 megapixel, you get pixel binning.
Yes, you get 4-in-1 pixel binning, so you can get that larger pixels for more light.
Yeah, so for those who are not familiar with what pixel binning is, right? So it's when 4 pixel combines to become 1. So if it's 4, right? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 in a grid. Those pixels combine to create 1 megapixel. The logic behind that is that it captures more detail, but more light. That means low light is improved.
Yes.
So the Xiaomi Mi A2 has that. What about the Motorola One?
The Motorola One, I'm not entirely sure if it has.
What camera does it have?
This has a, hang on, I have my notes here. It has a 13 megapixel plus 2 megapixel sensor.
Yeah, so the 2 megapixels probably is for depth field.
It's for depth effects, yes. Yeah. So it's not a super impressive camera. And the lens aperture on this is f2. This is f1.75.
So definitely out of the bat, this would be better.
Yeah, my guess, this will definitely be better in photography in general as well. Yeah.
So already we can establish that the Mi A2 is probably up there in terms of your favorites, right?
Yes.
So we have the Motorola One and then the Mi A2. Both are running on Android One.
Android One, yes.
What are the Android One devices are available in Malaysia right now?
Okay, for me, the So if I had to pick an Android One device right now, it would be this one.
Okay.
Even though, yeah, it has a small battery, but the rest of the specs are
Does
so
the
excellent.
does the small battery really affect you tried you reviewed this already, right?
I haven't published a review yet, but I have used this for extended periods of time.
So what's the
And
screen on time for
This is not very great. It's like below 4 hours.
Okay, so
Yeah.
on average, I mean, we try a lot of phones. One of the parameters when we go out to test a phone is to establish the screen on time.
Yes.
So there's the battery tracker that we install, and also there's a battery tracker inside the OS itself. And it tracks the screen on time. That means how long is the screen turned on for the duration of the battery in between charges. So on average, a good device would probably have about 5 and above in terms of
Yes.
screen on time. 5 hours and above.
5 is like the right in the middle point.
Yeah, that's like, okay, you need like to be on par with everybody in terms of good battery life. You need to have a minimum of 5 hours screen on time, irrespective of whatever you're using, right? Because the OS can optimize the things that you do. Having 5 hour and below is a bit of an issue, and I do see phones that have about the same battery size, 3000, and still able to churn out 5 plus hours.
One good example is the Mi A1.
Yeah, it was able to do 5 plus hours,
Yes,
right?
yes.
The disconcerting thing for me is this is running Android One, which theoretically should be the same experience, which theoretically should also optimize the battery and everything else. And there is no reason for it to run 5 hours or less. The display is also the same, right?
Yes, the display is the same, but the processor is different. So the Mi A1 has a more frugal 625.
I see.
Yeah, which is slightly lower powered from the 660, but it's probably most well known for being really frugal. So it sips at power.
The processor.
Yes, the
This one has more RAM as well, right?
This has no. There is also a 4 gig version for the Mi A1. Yeah.
But generally, more RAM would also consume more battery.
I wouldn't say so. I would say the key point here is RAM management. So if you have good RAM management, then you'll be fine. So it doesn't matter how much RAM you have, because it only comes into play when you are actively using
the RAM.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the front runner, which is the Mi A2. Then there's the Motorola One, and then there's a Nokia something or other that has.
So the other devices that you need to look at if you want an Android One phone is Nokia. They are really the only other major player with Android One, to my knowledge. So if you can think of more, let me know in the comments below. So the Nokia devices, you have the Nokia 6, you have the Nokia 7, you have the Nokia 8, or previously Nokia 8, now 8.1. So every version they add a 0.1 in front. And then you have the Nokia 5, 3, and 1. So the 1 was the Android Go device that we talked about. And then they recently released the Nokia 6.1 Plus and the 5.1 Plus.
So the 0.1 denotes Android One.
No, the 0.1 denotes a newer version. So like the
An update.
6.1, succeeds the 6, for example. Something that's generally the idea. But Nokia is like they have different names for different regions. So usually they launch in China first. So the Nokia 6.1 Plus was previously called the Nokia X6, and now it's the 6.1 Plus.
Yeah, well, we don't want to confuse people.
Yeah, okay. So
in Malaysia, there's 6.1,
6.1.
7.1.
We don't have the 7.1
Okay.
yet, if I'm not mistaken.
And
We have
there's
the 8.1,
8.1, yeah.
and we have the 5.1 Plus.
So those devices are available in Malaysia.
Yes, but the problem with Nokia phones is that you are paying a premium for it.
because of the name.
Because maybe it's because of the name. So in the past, it wasn't always like this. When the Nokia 8 first came out, for example, flagship specs, but you didn't have to pay a flagship price for it. I think it was like 2299 or 2399, something like that. And then from there, the other mid-range devices, they were slightly more expensive than their competition over at Xiaomi, for example. But Xiaomi is like, hard to beat. And Nokia's were better built. So they were really, really solid industrial phones with excellent metal unibodies. So that sort of balanced out the scales, right? So it wasn't as good value for money in terms of hardware performance, but you get a really well-built phone. And they even had excellent speakers. Then when I saw the Nokia 6.1 Plus launch, I was like, what on earth happened here? I was really quite disappointed. I had this whole video where I was like, really upset with it, because that is a Snapdragon 636 processor, which is slightly below the 660. So it's sort of a mid-ranger processor. And yet it's priced over 1,000 ringgit when it launched. Now you can get it for, I think, 999 ringgit. I think it's on sale now. But that was like way too much money for that kind of specs. And So you would think, oh, okay, because it's better built, right? So it has a better metal unibody. Not really, because they changed their philosophy. It's no longer about metal devices anymore. The Nokia 6.1 Plus was just a glass sandwich, which is like makes it pretty much identical to every other smartphone.
Yeah, it's like an iPhone 4. So it's glass and
And then the metal frame.
Yeah.
Yes. So no, you don't have that industrial super solid feeling device that you get with the Nokia 6, for example.
Yeah.
So that for me was pretty disappointing. So if you want an Android One device, you're gonna have to expect to pay a bit of a premium if you don't want to go for the Mi A2. But that's about it.
But there's no reason for you to go beyond the Mi A2. So you mentioned now there's 3 options, right? At least 3 brands: the Motorola,
Yep.
the Xiaomi, and also the Nokia. So already we can eliminate the Motorola because I don't understand why we need to pay for the premium. It has a
HD
HD screen,
Yeah.
less capable camera, at least from the hardware aspect, and it's much more expensive. So I don't understand why we need that. So I guess we can eliminate that. And then we have the Nokia range, which to me seems very what's the word I'm looking for? It's commoditized. There's really very different. There's very little in terms of differentiating the 3 variances aside from specs. All of them kind of look the same. They have the same software, which is the Android One.
Yes.
I don't know. For me, I feel like I'm gravitating towards the Xiaomi as well because number one, experience-wise, the camera is so much better. Android is Android. You get it across the same. I mean, I like the design.
And it's well built.
Yeah.
It looks pretty good. It's
Yeah.
Slim, it's light, charges with USB-C, fast
Yeah.
charging.
Yeah.
The only real downside there is the 3000 mAh battery. But if you're not a really heavy user, it might not affect you the same way it affects me.
Yeah. And then, you're in this range where you're looking for a phone that's below 1,000, right? And when you go into the marketing, when you go into this range of devices that's 1,000 ringgit, right? The dynamics changes. People really want the money to work for them. They really want the most that they can get. They want the biggest battery, the most features, the best camera. And the other brands, the Motorola and the Nokia, kind of like missed that philosophy. They're going like, okay, let's price it a bit higher, slightly above 1,000 ringgit, but then it's compromising in terms of display or camera or whatever. And that kind of turns people off within that range. I'm putting 1,000 ringgit on the table. I want the most I can get. And again, the Xiaomi A2 fits that bill.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right with that.
Yeah.
So when you're a budget phone hunter, you're really looking to get the most device for your money.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be sold this premium idea. You
Yeah.
know, you just want like raw out and out performance, battery life, screen, whatever you can get for however little money that you need to pay. So that's why I think like in terms of Nokia, the biggest draw here is their brand, right? It's the Nokia brand, which
doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean,
not anymore, right?
No, I mean like okay, let's say I came from the generation where where Nokia was king. Nokia was like the iPhone back then. I mean, those of you who came from that generation know that the people that started phones were Nokia. You would not buy anything else other than Nokia. They came out with a lot of phones and a lot of different variables or variances, and then suddenly they fell off this burning platform. iPhone killed them, BlackBerry killed them, and then now they're coming back. But they're coming back trying to hark on that nostalgia, on that Nokia is this brand that was creating all these amazing phones back then before the age of smartphones. The problem is it's not even the same company.
Exactly.
It's not even the same people. So it's just a name, So if you are going to go buy a Nokia with that notion or that idea that it is the Nokia that you think it was before, I don't think it is anymore. I think a lot of other devices fill in that gap. Xiaomi particularly, even Huawei, even Asus can do a better job than Nokia and Motorola. And again, Motorola has the same problem. It's no longer in its DNA or in its spirit the same company that you grew up with, or I grew up with at least. It's now with Google, right?
It's now with
Lenovo.
Yes.
It's I mean, there's no point hacking on the brand. And people don't really care. Within that price segment, they don't really care about the brand. Look at Pocophone. It's like some obscure brand. Look at Honor. Look at
Yeah, and look at the cult following that they have, you know.
Yeah, there's
It's incredible.
Yeah, so I guess do you want to go down that list of devices? Is there any more other devices other than that? Well, okay, there's a Zenfone, right?
Yeah,
So what about the Zenfone?
there is the Zenfone. So the latest one to come out is the Max Pro M2, which was like succeeding the Max Pro M1, which was also this really popular phone because it was Asus really going for this niche market that was Xiaomi's stronghold and just like meeting them head on with a device that could match them in terms of
So
specs.
throw everything you can, and price it as low as
you can.
possible. Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, the pricing was even lower than Xiaomi. So
And it has a bigger battery, right?
and it has a bigger battery.
like 5,000 or something.
Yes, exactly, 5,000. So that's why
That's
it was
huge, man.
it was ridiculous. So you could get excellent battery life with it. There were a couple of trade-offs. So you lose, for example, 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, which is dual band, slightly faster than your normal 2.4 gigahertz, which is honestly not a huge deal if you ask me. Yeah, but then that smartphone came out, and then it was like really competitive with the Xiaomi device. But then after that, they followed up with the Max Pro M2.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people mistake this Zenfone line.
There's like a misconception.
Yes, I think a lot of people mistake their operating system because they're running on what they call a stock Android experience. But a lot of people think that it's also Android 1. So it's not really like Android 1. It's actually slightly different. So there are preloaded apps in the Zenfone's software.
But it's not Android 1 period, right?
It's not Android 1.
It's not even slightly different. It is not Android 1.
It's not Android 1.
Because when you have an Android 1 phone, when you turn it on, it will say Android 1 or it says Android. It will say Android 1,
Yes,
right?
I believe it does.
Okay.
Yes. So
Okay.
this is completely not even an Android 1 device.
Yeah.
It just runs stock Android. And Asus doesn't try to hide this. They always say that it's a stock Android device. So yeah, it's just people seem to misinterpret that. So the difference between that is right now the software updates, you don't have that Google guarantee.
The 2 year.
Yes, the 2 years. But that being said, Asus's track record, although they are a bit slow with the updates, they have been keeping their phones supported for quite a while. So that's okay. But they do come with a couple of preloaded apps. In Malaysia, for example, you get 3 big ones besides the Asus tools. So you get Facebook, you get Messenger, and you get Instagram. So those cannot be uninstalled. It can be disabled, but it cannot be uninstalled. So previously I was like not happy with that, right? Because like I don't want to be forced to have these apps. But then these are such common apps. These are apps that pretty much everybody use.
Yeah.
You know, I think the impact when it comes to that in terms of bloat is not as great as like a fully skinned Zen UI, for example. But it's not Android 1, so do not make that mistake. It's not an Android 1 device.
So correct the misconception. The Asus Zenfone Max
Pro,
right?
Yes.
Only that one, right?
Yeah, only that line.
Is not an Android 1 device. So if you're looking for an Android 1 device, maybe that is not. But on the flip side, it's not running Zen UI as well, which is Asus
Own
OS
skin
skin
version, yes.
over Android. So it's not running Zen UI. So you do get like a stock experience, but it's not an Android 1 experience.
Yes.
That just adds the confusion for me, actually.
It does,
It's like,
it does.
If you want to, so that means you can run non-Android 1 OS and still have a stock Android experience. Again, there's no rules.
At least none that I know.
Yeah, it's the intent lah. So if you want if you are very particular about your apps and you know what you want to get, your options would be the pure Android 1 version. The best one right now is we both agree is the Xiaomi Mi A2, which is
I think about 800 ringgit.
800.
799 right now. Yeah.
That's I think an amazing deal.
It is.
If you're not really particular about an Android 1 OS, but still would want a stock Android experience, the Zenfone Max
Pro
M2.
It's a really long name.
Zenfone Max Pro M2 with its 5,000 milliamp hour battery, really okay, not bad display. The specs, the build quality is really good too. I mean, you did a review for that, right?
Yes, I do have a review for that, and it will be here. maybe.
Somewhere or other.
Somewhere it will appear.
Oh, you can just Google it.
Exactly. So that was actually a very impressive device. So it went from being a Redmi Note 5 competitor at the time with about the same processor, but the same memory configurations, but much bigger battery and a few other sacrifices here and there, to leapfrogging actually the Redmi Note 5, because it was almost as if Xiaomi was a bit slow on the shift towards the more powerful processor. So when they went from Zenfone M1 to M2, M2 had a Snapdragon 660 processor, which is like one tier higher, for example, maybe half a tier higher, something like that. So it's an upper mid-range processor, which means it's a lot more powerful than the Redmi Note 5 that it was so competitive with. But they did that without changing the price. So it's still the same price that you can get the Max Pro M2. I think it's 50 ringgit more expensive for the base model, but the top spec model is exactly the same.
Okay, but then there's a caveat to Zenfone devices. My experience, so there's a lot of Asus Zenfone devices out there in the market. Everything else other than the Zenfone Max 2 Pro M2, whatever, Zenfone Max Pro M2. So other than the Zenfone Max Pro M2, all the other, I mean, most of the other Zenfones are kind of neither here nor there. They fall into this bucket of Nokia and Motorola again. If you want a cheap phone, maybe a Honor or a Huawei would be better, or a Xiaomi would be better. But the Zenfone Max Pro M2 kind of like hits the sweet spot of like really great battery life, not bad specs, not bad battery, not bad performance, a camera, and really not bad OS.
Yeah.
So
you're exactly right with that.
So we started out with this question, right? What is the best Android One smartphone you can get out there? Well, okay, the answer is if you want a really good Android One smartphone, you get the Xiaomi Mi
A2, yeah. That would be my recommendation.
For less than 800 ringgit. Yes. But if you're not particular about Android One experience, but still want a stock Android experience, try out the Zenfone Max Pro M2.
Yes.
I still cannot say the name in one breath. But yeah, just go out there and try it out. If you want to know more, Rory has a review of the, again, Zenfone Pro...
Max Pro.
Zenfone Max Pro M2 on our website, switches.com. So the breakdown of devices, Android One, not a lot is available in Malaysia. There's a Motorola option, there's a Nokia option, and there's a Xiaomi option. Recommendation is to get the Xiaomi option. What do you guys think? Do you have any other questions about the Android One experience? You have any comments or whatever? Just let us know in the comment section below. We'll answer them for you. Okay, Rory, so thanks for staying on with us. Now we're gonna go into the last topic in this episode, which is the Honor View 20 and the Nova 4. So a lot of you guys are very interested about these devices. Obviously, these devices have just been recently launched in Malaysia or globally. They're going to be available in Malaysia. Like, they are available in Malaysia by the time this show goes on YouTube. And they are very close to each other. So Huawei and Honor. So Honor is actually this a brand under.
It's a sub-brand.
It's a sub-brand under Huawei.
Yes.
And the logic behind is Honor is going to cater for the not lower end, but the more price sensitive segment of the market. What happens is a lot of cutting edge technology that comes from Huawei devices trickle down to Honor devices. So that's a brief rundown of Honor. Then you have Nova, which is a brand under Huawei, a model under Huawei, that also caters for the same market segment, the price sensitive segment, and it also uses the same trickle down technology, right? So you get the same Kirin processor, similar cameras. And what's interesting for me is that the View 20 and the Nova 4, which are kind of like weeks apart in terms of launching and are from the same brand, have almost identical specs. So for example, the headline specs for me is the 48 megapixel camera. And so both devices, the Huawei Honor View 20 and the Nova 4, have the same, exactly the same sensor and everything, 48 megapixel camera. and the same punch hole display, right? Even the sizes are the same.
The sizes apparently are slightly different, but from what I can tell, they look exactly the same.
Yeah, it's almost the same.
Yeah.
The punch hole display is the same, but the prices are the same, or
Prices are slightly different.
so it's confusing, right? Even for me, it's confusing. I interchange the two brands so many times. I don't remember already. So you have these two phones that kind of look the same, have roughly the same specs, probably around the same price. Which one should you get? So Honor View 20 or the Nova 4? What is the spec rundown for both?
Right. Yeah. So we'll start just by looking at the specs. So like
Yeah.
you said, they're very, very similar. So we'll start with the the Huawei Nova 4. Look, even I'm doing it now. So we'll start with the Huawei Nova 4. So it's at its core, it has a Kirin 970 processor, which is their flagship processor from 2017. It is the one that you find on their Mate series that launched in 2017. So then that is paired to 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage. Then you have a 3750 mAh battery, and you have a full HD plus display with a punch hole in it. So that means 2310 by 1080 pixels. It's an okay resolution, but you lose a bit of PPI because you have so much more screen now. So then it also has support for fast charging. It has a USB-C port, and it runs on the latest version of Huawei software, which is EMUI 9, built on top of Android Pie.
Okay.
And then you look at the View 20. So the View 20, the big difference here regarding the internal specs is that it has a better processor. So it comes with the Kirin 980, which is their 2018 flagship processor that launched with the Mate 20. So that's a more capable processor, but it trades off a bit of processing power for RAM. So the base model, which is the same, supposedly the same tier as the Nova, that comes with 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of internal storage. So they have the same punch hole display, but the View 20 has actually one tier higher. So it has a higher spec variant that is coming with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of internal storage. So the difference here is that one has one variant, one has two variants. And then if we look at the battery, it also has a slightly bigger battery, 4000 mAh instead of 3750, but it also charges via USB-C. But this particular phone actually supports Huawei's 4-volt sorry, I have the number here. It is 4.5 volt and 5 amp fast charging, which is basically their supercharger technology that you'd find on the Mate 20 also has that. But that's, I think, 2.0. This could be 1.0. I'm not entirely sure on that. If you know, let me know in the comments. So they're very, very similar devices if you look at the internals. But then the similarities extend to the body. So both of these phones actually have the same kind of glass and metal sandwich design.
Feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not only are they built from roughly the same materials, they feel almost identical in the hand. So it has the same curve, the same way that the frame is matted out, and it has the same kind of viewing experience from the front. In fact, from the front, I couldn't even tell the difference between the two devices. So, even though the rear camera module looks pretty similar, there are some differences there. So the biggest difference is in the camera. So remember when you said there was a 48 megapixel camera on the Nova 4?
Yeah.
In Malaysia, unfortunately, we're not getting that. We're only getting the 20 megapixel sensor. But the Nova 4 has a triple camera setup. So you have the 20 megapixel wide-angled sensor, which is the main one that you'll be shooting with most of the time. You have the 16 megapixel f2.2, which is an ultra-wide lens that you would find on the Mate 20, for example. Very similar to that. And it has a third depth sensor, which is about 2 megapixels. Whereas on the Honor View 20, you only have two cameras. You have the main sensor, which is a 48 megapixel sensor, which is the one everybody's so excited about. And you have a second one, which is called the time of flight sensor. So they're not calling it a depth sensor because apparently it does a bit more. So this sensor is here to help the smartphone with 3D image recognition. So it has the ability to recognize your face at the more depth of your face apparently, and apply their new beautification features that will tone your face better according to the sensor. But it also gives you access to movement recognition, almost like Microsoft's Kinect, which is something you find with the Xbox, for example. So that's what the time of flight sensor does. But besides that, these are like so similar. And if you look at the pricing, oh my gosh, the pricing. So the Nova 4, for example, is priced at 1,899 ringgit.
This is the non-48 megapixel camera, right?
Yes.
This is the Malaysian one, right?
This is the Malaysian one. So it's 1,899 ringgit, and you can get it in two colors, crushed blue and black. And then on the on the View 20 side of things, you have two variants, where you have the base model, 6 gigs of RAM, that is 1,999 ringgit, so it's 100 ringgit more expensive. But there's also the higher spec one with more memory, more storage. That device is priced at 2,499 ringgit. So the high spec one is also designed with Moschino, which is apparently this Italian fashion brand that I have never heard of before, because as you can probably tell, I'm not a fashionable person. So that design, co-designed with Moschino.
Yeah.
I hope I'm saying it right. And that will come in Phantom Blue, and Phantom Red will come a bit later. But the base model, you don't get no Italian luxury brand to design it for you. So that one you're only getting the regular Sapphire Blue and the Midnight Black.
While the two devices are similar, right, in terms of specifications of what you can get globally, Huawei has segmentized it very well in Malaysia that the differences is actually very easy to discern, right? So the Nova 4 doesn't have the 48 megapixel camera, runs on an older 970 processor, and has less RAM.
Slightly smaller battery,
Yeah,
more RAM.
A smaller battery, more RAM, and there's only one variant.
Yes.
Right? So it's 8 gig,
It's
1
to 8.
8 gigs and 128 gigs of storage.
Yep.
Right? Then if you want to go higher, you're still within the same ecosystem, which is under Huawei. Then you have the View 20 with the 48 megapixel camera, slightly
Less
better display,
Slightly better processor.
slightly better processor.
So
So
it's
you get
980.
the Kirin 980 processor. I just want to highlight the Kirin 980 is one of my favorite processors. I'm running the P20 Pro. Moving on to the Mate 20 Pro, I have to say the 980 is really good in terms of power consumption, battery life. On the Huawei devices that are running 980 is better than average, better than most devices that you can get out there. So and then the problem is the higher end View 20, the 8 gigs to 56 gigs of storage, encroaches slightly into the flagship territory.
Yes.
Yeah, so you're touching 2,500 ringgit, right?
It's actually 100 ringgit more expensive than the newly slashed price of the Mate 20,
The Mate 20, right?
which is now 2,399.
Yeah, and you also have within that territory is also the older over close to a year now, or over a year, P20 Pro, which has a really good camera. So for me, it's like, so if we're talking about the View 20 versus the Nova 4, no contest in Malaysia. Nova 4 is lower spec, literally lower spec, and then you have the View 20, which is higher spec, better processor, but slightly higher camera. I would argue in terms of the camera, you're doing the review on the View 20, right?
Correct.
But the challenge for me is, would I want to get the View 20 because of the camera and the punch hole display, or would I rather stay with the P20 Pro or the Mate 20? And that is the bigger question for me, because the P20 is really appealing. The Mate 20 maybe not so much, because I prefer the Pro version. So I don't know. I mean, you're doing the review. What do you think of the View 20 so far? You're doing the 8 gig version, right?
I have the base model,
Okay.
128.
But essentially the processor and all that is the same. Battery is still the same.
Battery is the same. Correct.
Okay.
So
What are your findings?
For me, for the first part of your question, if you are like on a P20 or a Mate 20, like would you want to switch to this just for the punch hole, right? I think no. My answer would be no, because when you're buying a P20, you're buying a Mate 20, you're buying a flagship, like a proper Huawei flagship smartphone, right? Because it comes with more than just internals. You also get that triple camera setup, you know, that proper night mode, which is like so valuable to a Huawei smartphone. And those are things you don't get on the View 20. So View 20 also has a night mode, but from my testing, it's nowhere near
it's not as good, right?
It's nowhere near as good.
So okay, here's the other thing. The night mode is the same. I mean, it's the same name. Processor is the same. Manufacturer is the same. OS is the same.
Well, they call it something different now. Now it's called the Huawei Magic OS
Yeah.
versus the EMUI, but they're basically the
Okay,
same.
essentially the same. But when you go down to the image processing, which is very particular, so we talked about this, right?
Yes.
Hardware is one thing, but image processing is another thing, and smartphones are really good at that. The Huawei, the genuine Huawei models, the flagship models, are super good at doing that. And it doesn't trickle down to the value,
Novas
the
and-
bargain,
yeah.
not bargain lah, the value sensitive segment, the Novas and the
Honor
views,
views,
which is weird. So I don't know.
I'm guessing
And
for
then also I forgot to add, the P20 Pro, if you are considering, has Leica optics. I mean,
yes,
Leica certified lah at least, but it does make a difference for me. I mean, I have it. I mentioned this in a number of episodes. I have two phones. I have the Note 8 and the P20 Pro. The P20 Pro will be my first choice every time I want to take a picture. And every time I don't bring my P20 Pro and I need to take a picture, I feel like, damn it, I should have bought my P20 Pro. So it is that amazing. And I don't think, so with your review, I mean, with little time I have with the device, I don't think the View 20 or even the Nova 4 can match that in terms of picture quality and stuff like that. What would you think?
I completely agree. I really don't think that they will match either. I think on the flagship, the P series, the Mate series, they're doing something else. There is like, maybe they have like a special team to work on the optimizations or the AI configurations and the processing to give it that better image quality. So what you are getting with the P series and the Mate series is definitely a better camera, which is a hallmark of a flagship smartphone. So for a mid-range smartphone, like the Nova 4 or the View 20, you can't really count on their image quality as much. So although this one has a 48 megapixel sensor, I don't think that it would necessarily be that much better than the Nova 4. Because megapixels is just one part of the story,
Just
right?
numbers.
Yes.
I mean, not just numbers, but it's just one part of
It
the
helps,
story.
yeah, but it's also one part of the story. So it's I think in terms because I didn't spend a lot of time with the Nova 4, so I spent a lot more time with the View 20, and but from my brief testing, the Nova 4's camera does seem to take very similar photos with the View 20. So if you're looking for a camera experience, you're definitely going to want to go for a Mate series phone or a P series phone. Yeah, you won't want to go for this. But this is designed to be more affordable, more bang for buck, so you're getting more processing. You're getting a processor, the same kind of processor for a lower price.
But yeah, I mean, the differentiator is the storage. Like I said, the top end of the View 20 goes into this flagship range of devices.
Correct.
And it's a whole different ballgame. But to be fair, if you take the View 20 in isolation, it is quite a capable device. And it is quite attractive, that chevron design. I mean, if you can take a look at it, I don't know whether you can see it. So that chevron design is really cool, especially in black. I think Najib has a black version.
Yeah, but I prefer the blue one.
Yeah,
it's more
okay, so
obvious.
preference. But it's really cool. I mean, unfortunately, you're gonna put a case on it, so it doesn't matter. and then you have the. Let me see if I can kick this out. So and then you have the punch hole display, which is, I mean, it works. It is kind of a game changer. It is immersive. When I view it, I kind of forget that there's a big black hole there. So it works for me. So in isolation, this is a really attractive device. But, the price, I don't know. What do you guys think? Okay, if you had to choose, right? So you have X amount of money. Usually it's like that, right? I have a budget. So my budget is 2005. So I have on the table right now the View 20, the Mate 20, and the P20 Pro.
What about the Nova 4?
Nova is not the same price, right?
Oh, you mean the high spec version?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going for the 2,500. Which one should I get?
I would,
Which one would you
if you
get?
ask me, I would get the P20 for sure.
The P20 Pro.
The P20 Pro, yes. The P20 Pro for sure.
Yes.
So that is the kind of device that I would go for because I like the camera more than I like this camera. Yes, and I personally don't mind the notch. So we're coming back to this display, right? You're also picking, if you would pick this phone, it's also for the punch hole display. So I think the punch hole is definitely less obtrusive than a notch, like a full-on notch. But it's also, to me, it looks a bit like dead pixels on your smartphone. It's not so obvious with the notch because it's attached to the top of the phone, so it looks like it's part of
And
the
you can
phone.
hide it.
Yeah,
With the P20, the Mate 20.
You can also hide the punch hole here.
Okay.
But the problem with that is because there is a screen around it as well, it makes it look like a defect. Or at least it made it look like a defect when I first started using this. And I actually had a bit of a debate, a bit of a discussion with one of our commenters in one of my posts about this, and it just looks like that. But it's something that I've completely gotten used to. And if you hate the notch, this is a great alternative.
Much better, right?
Yes, it's a much better alternative.
And with the right wallpaper, you can kind of like hide it. So during the launch, they had this wallpaper that had like a dog, and the one eye of the dog is actually hiding the notch. I think we'll try to pull that out.
That was really funny.
We'll try to pull that out when that image when we have for this video, right? So. Is there anything else you want to talk about with regards to the View 20 versus the Nova 4?
I think if we were looking at the Nova 4 and the View 20, they are very similar devices, yes, but there are also, I think they have, like the Venn diagrams don't completely overlap. There are some differences. So the View 20 has a bigger battery, a more capable processor, which I believe is also more frugal. So you might want to pony up 100 ringgit extra for that. But then on the flip side of things, you trade off in terms of camera versatility, because you lose the ultra wide angle, you lose you just lose the ultra wide angle, and you get this smartphone with just one 48 megapixel camera, you know.
They don't have zoom lenses, right?
No zoom lenses, but they have because there's such a high resolution, it's able to crop in, so you don't lose that much detail. The zooming on this is actually pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, I would prefer a physical zoom lens. Again, my photograph favorite is the P20 Pro. The zoom is super awesome. You don't lose detail. Among the team members, we'd argue that, okay, maybe the P20 Pro and the Mate 20 employs slightly more aggressive sharpening and processing. That is a bit of an issue. But to my untrained eye, I'm not a professional photographer. I'm just somebody that likes to post stuff on Instagram and Facebook. It looks stunning for that usage. I'm not going to have like an exhibition with large print or whatever. But it works for me. And it works for me in a number of situations, especially in low light.
Yeah.
So
there's no argument that in low light is excellent. The only one that can really compete with it is the Pixel with its night sight, but that came so much later. And I think the best way to summarize like the P20 or the Mate 20's photos is that if you want it's the kind of smartphone camera for people who like the over edited look or like the Instagram friendly look, but who don't want to learn how to edit photos on their desktop, So it's a quick and easy snap, publish, straight to publish. If you don't want to mess around with settings, you don't want to mess around in Lightroom and stuff like that, it's fine. If you don't, because when it comes to sharpening and all that, you don't notice that when it's in Instagram. Yeah, when it's in Instagram or if it's in Facebook, because the quality is being compressed.
Yeah, so not really a big deal. So we started off this segment with this question, right? Nova 4 versus the View 20. I guess the foregone conclusion, at least in Malaysia, right, there's no contest. There's only one version of the Nova 4. You literally get a lesser spec. You don't get the 48 megapixel version. Processor and everything is the same. And then so you have the Nova 4, which is cheaper, but 100 ringgit cheaper than the base model View 20.
Yes.
So
I think at that point,
you're not saving a lot. Like, I guess if you are really price sensitive, 100 ringgit can be a big deal. But if you can, like Rory say, pony up the 100 ringgit, the base model View 20 is so much better because of the processor.
Yeah.
And the camera.
Well,
potentially because it has a bit more megapixel
in terms of image quality, but you do lose versatility
because there's no wide angle. But in terms of comparison, there's really not much of a difference. So you either save 100 ringgit, which is always much better, or go 100 ringgit and get that 980 processor, which is the current processor.
Yes.
That all the Huawei flagships are
and likely the P30 will come out with the 980
also. Yeah. So then. Okay, so Nova 4, if you want to save money, you get the Nova 4. Not much difference in terms of the camera. Don't get fooled by the numbers or whatever. Just try it. If you like it, go for it. Then you move on to the higher end View 20, the high spec one, the 256 8GB.
Yeah,
which uses the same processor, for 48 megapixel camera without the wide angle of the Nova 4. So that one is priced at 2,499, right?
Yes.
2,500 ringgit. And that, so just a summary, that encroaches into the flagship territory. And you have more capable devices there, particularly in the Huawei stable, the P20 Pro.
Yep.
So if you ask me, and then I'm going to ask you later, if it was me, I spend my money on the P20 Pro, hands down, for 2,500 ringgit.
I completely agree. I would get, if you can get a P20 Pro for that kind of price, yeah, I would go for that.
Yeah, go for the P20 Pro. So to answer your question, Nova 4 versus View 20, which one should you get? If you want to save money, go for the Nova 4. If you want to spend a bit more money,
For a
get the
better processor.
base model View 20 for a
Yes.
better processor and add 100 ringgit more. Or go for the P20 Pro
Compared to the high spec one.
compared to the high spec one.
Yep.
But the P20 Pro high spec the P20 Pro does not have 256 gigs of storage though.
I don't have that right off the top of
Yeah.
my head, but I don't believe they do.
Yeah.
Correct me in the comments.
Maybe it's 128. So you might trade off storage,
Yes.
but not really a big deal for me lah. I'm using the 128. I don't know because I don't need extra storage. So yeah. All right, I guess that's pretty much it, and that wraps up this episode of LTA. I think this episode is probably the most in-depth and probably one of the best ones. Let us know in the comments. As always, we enjoy doing this, and we enjoy talking about all this stuff. We do this every day, and we enjoy making a show so that you can be a part of this conversation. And that works when you comment and let us know what you think and what you want us to talk about in the next episode. Give us a thumbs up if you like this show. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to comment and let us know what your feedbacks are. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're searchishow.com. And as always, catch the best tech news, reviews, and everything else on searchishow.com. This is Amin,
And I'm Rory.
and this is Let's Talk About. Thanks for watching, guys.
Bye.